Each year, the Melbourne Press Club awards two prizes of which we're particularly proud. One is the Young Journalist of the Year Award, which we award in conjunction with our annual Quill Awards each March, and our Student Journalist of the Year Award. And for the best part of a decade now, we've sent the prize for that, the Young Journalist of the Year Award, is that we send the winning journalist to attend the Investigative Editors and Reporters and Editors Conference in the United States, which is the bee's knees event for investigative journalism in the United States, and a wonderful opportunity for young journalists to be exposed to some of the best operators in the profession. And for the last 3 years, we've also sent our Student Journalist of the Year winner to that conference. And after the conference, which is in June, this year it was in Houston, we invite the journalists to come and share briefly some of their experiences with us at an event such as today. So today I'm pleased to welcome Matilda Marozzi from the ABC, who was our Young Journalist of the Year Award winner for 2018. Please welcome her.
Thanks for having me. It's an honour to be here with Alan Fels and Adele Ferguson, who are two people whose work I really admire. Happy? I'm sure you're familiar with their work, but you may not be as familiar with mine. In 2018, I did a series of stories on underpayment in the hospitality industry, the first of which was on Shannon Bennett's restaurant, Rue du Monde, which is one of the most exclusive restaurants in Melbourne, but wasn't paying their staff minimum wages, and followed with a series of stories on places including Northcote's Barry Cafe and Birch and Purchase, and then The Age started doing some stories on venues like Rockpool. And by May, the Andrews State Labor government had announced that they'll be criminalising wage theft in their terms. So potentially employers who are intentionally underpaying their workers could end up going to jail. And it was, thanks. It was awesome doing that work and seeing what had happened and seeing workers get back paid. And the cherry on top was to find out in March that I was awarded the Young Journalist of the Year and had the opportunity to go to this conference in the US. I was joined by Peter Bateman, who is a Young Student Journalist of the Year from Monash. He's in Thailand working at the UN, so isn't here today to talk about his experiences, but I can vouch for it that he had a good time and learnt a lot. I'll tell you a little bit about the conference. It was in Houston this year, incredibly hot, humid, and I was pretty jet-lagged when I got there. Went for 3.5 days. This year's conference was actually the biggest it ever had. There was almost 2,000 investigative reporters, editors, and journalism students there who were interested in investigations. And across the weekend, there was 175 panels, workshops, and classes that were offered for people to attend. To focus on diversity as well, 60% of the speakers there were women and 30% were journalists of colour. A huge breadth of topics were covered in these panels, some of which were about finding, cultivating and protecting sources, how to find and frame investigations, backgrounding, preparing for confrontational interviews, and also a lot of talk about how to deal with data, how to find data, how to get stories out of data and then include that and present that in your reporting. There was, as I said, 175 panels. I definitely didn't go to all of them, but I thought I'd share some highlights. Towards the end of the conference, they had an awards luncheon where they put out awards for some of the best reporting across the world, and also the Golden Padlock for the most secretive organisation, which this year was awarded to Michigan University, who'd kept a lot of information secret in terms of sexual assault that had occurred on campus with some of their teachers there. The keynote speaker this year was Rick Hutsul. He's the editor of the Capital Gazette in Annapolis, Maryland. And most of you wouldn't have heard of Rick if it wasn't for the shooting that occurred in his newsroom in June 2018. And a gunman walked into the local newsroom there for a local paper and killed 5 of his reporters. That was almost half of his staff. He happened to be on holiday that week, and from his keynote speech, it seems like he still feels a lot of guilt for the fact that he wasn't there for the newsroom in such a traumatic time. His speech was really emotional and heartfelt and moving, but through the trauma, what shone through was his belief in local journalism and how important that is for the community. And he said afterwards, what was important for him is that they kept putting out the paper, and journalists from around the country, reporters who had been there years ago, came and volunteered their time to help put out the paper to make sure that the local community still had their news, despite the fact that this horrific event had happened. The community also rallied around them, and he said he realised from the community's reaction how important this paper actually was for the people living there. And listening to him, it was a reminder of how important local news is, and just the magnitude of what we've been losing in the past decade or more, with all these local papers shutting down and regional television bulletins no longer going to air in Victoria. The showcase panel this year was called Investigating Trump World, and involved some of the biggest names of reporters around the US who've done stories on Trump, including Andrea Bernstein from New York Public Radio, Suzanne Craig from the New York Times, David Farenholt from the Washington Post, and there was a couple of others as well. They discussed their biggest investigations, how they did them, the importance of documents and data, as well as trusted sources in how to cover this president who is almost unprecedented in how to deal with him in the White House, and the number of, well, there was a debate about whether you call them lies or false news or whatever you want to call them, but how to work with that. There was also some kind of funner sessions. A charismatic journalist called Al Tompkins from Pointer he presented these Al's cool tools for investigators, and he had mostly free, because you know journalists don't have a lot of money, but tools that you could use to either do your investigative reporting or to help present it. This included Batch Geo, which allowed you to make great map graphics from spreadsheets in seconds. There was interview transcription tools, and also the ability to make out 3D images with some software, or how to find out where photos were taken so that you can verify that what you're reporting is true. When I arrived in June, it was shortly after Annika Smethurst was raided and the AFP raided offices of the ABC in Sydney. And so, particularly talking to people in my work sometimes where they don't want their identity revealed, and knowing that the AFP could potentially get a warrant and come and look at your emails and change them even, I was interested in finding out more about digital security, and they had a fair bit on that as well. The Electronic Frontier Foundation has put together a free online surveillance self-defense course, and if anyone's dealing with sensitive sources and doesn't know about that, I'd recommend educating yourself. But sadly, at the end of the session, I figured even with the best digital hygiene, it's difficult to completely cover your tracks and protect sources, but it's definitely important to try and minimise the chance of that, and something that I'm doing at the moment and will continue to do as technology changes and you need to keep up. It was definitely a privilege to have the time to dedicate to my professional development. By far the most valuable thing was just meeting all of the people there, and to be surrounded by hundreds of investigative journalists who are really passionate about what they do, who care about what they do, and to share their craft and their passion was amazing. It also gave me perspective. At the conference hotel, of course, in Houston, there was like a Texas-shaped pool on the front that you could walk around, and I was there and I met a journalist from Russia. His name's Roman Anin. He's done a lot of stories exposing organised crime and corruption in Russia, and I talked to him and I was like, isn't it risky working as a journalist there? And he kind of shrugged it off, and he's like, yeah, you know, it's risky. And he said 6 of his colleagues had been killed doing their work, but said it wasn't so bad because more journalists were killed in Mexico or something. And it's a real wake-up call for me, because while we don't have the constitutional right to freedom of speech that a lot of journalists did there from the US, I don't feel like my life is at risk for just doing my job. If anyone wants more information about the conference, some of the sessions that were happening, or access to the tip sheets that I got, feel free to get in touch with me either here or I'm on Twitter at Marozzi_M. It was an amazing opportunity, and thanks again to the Press Club for sending me and Peter there. And I'm thrilled that I got the opportunity to go there, and hope that it improves my work as an investigative journalist as I progress through my career. Thanks.